Montana Governor Steve Bullock was one of the last major Democrats to enter the race for the White House, and he is hoping that cross-party appeal can lift him to the nomination. He joined me in the studio earlier today.
So I'm the only one in the field that actually won in a Trump state with Trump on the ballot. He took Montana by 21 points in 2016. I won by 4. 25 to 30% of my voters voted for Donald Trump. And if we can't win back some of the places that we lost in this last election, plus bring out our base, well, then Trump's going to be president.
What is it that you did? What is it that you have, or the argument that you made to Trump voters in Montana that resonated?
Yeah, and I think it's more than, like, this argument's more than about electability from my perspective. I mean, how I get things done, too, because my legislature's about 60% Republican, is that folks don't agree with everything that certainly I stand for, but I go out, I listen, I try to understand their life, and I also say both, here is where I want to go from a policy perspective, even if people may have differences a little bit, because we want the same things, right? We want a decent job. We want a roof over our head. We want clean air, clean water, safe community. And I think those, and having the conviction then to be able to go to places, not just among Democrats, but to talk to business folks, to talk to people all across, is I think how I get people that often may not agree with everything that I say or stand for, but believe that I'll fight for their best interests.
Do you think there's still a big appetite within the Democratic Party for that sort of cross-partisan outreach of working together? Because it increasingly feels as though there are some people who want to give up on the idea that that's even a worthwhile pursuit.
Well, I think we are now at like this challenging time with this 240-year experiment called representative democracy, right? And we need to make sure that first we got to beat Donald Trump, but we've got to make D.C. work again. And so many of the issues that you see also, and I've done more, I was Attorney General for a governor in this post-Citizens United world. I think that money and the outside spending of money has made part of Washington, D.C. just so it's frozen. It can't move on anything.
And to be clear, this is sort of what you've been calling your big idea. The main theme of your campaign is in terms of getting money out of politics, changing who has influence.
Changing who has influence. When we pay more for drugs and health care than any country in the world, yet we also can't even negotiate drug prices. Or when we can no longer even talk about climate change because of the outside interest. Republicans used to at least acknowledge that the climate crisis was real. We had to do something about it. But now you can't even get a Republican to say, yeah, we must do something about it. You look at a whole generation of workers have been replaced by independent contractors, while union membership is about half of what it was in the 1980s. And I think a lot of that really is, if we're going to fix the problems that Americans expect, you got to deal with the outside spending in our elections.
Okay, how do you've made the case that you have the best shot at winning back a lot of these Trump voters, Trump states. Within the primary, however, how do you break out of such a crowded field?
I think, first of all, that I break out because we not only have to win, we have to govern. You know, as a governor, most of the issues that we'll be talking about over the next year and a half, I've had to deal with. Health care. I've had to deal with education. I've had to deal with making sure, I mean, there are more Montanans as a percentage that have moved into the middle class than any state in the country. I've had to deal with the fact that not everybody's going to go to college, so we made our 2-year colleges about professionally recognized certificates, and there's 1,000 different apprenticeable fields out there. It's not just welding. So from that perspective, I think my experience is different. I think geographically I'm different. You know, if we ever want to get Washington, D.C. to work, this is more than about 270 electoral votes.
How important is it for your campaign to make the first debate? Do you think you'll make it? And would you drop out if you don't make it?
Well, as long as people go to stevebullock.com, I'm going to make sure to get on that debate stage. You know, I sure hope that I make the debate, and I think that unfortunately, they're even starting to change the rules. Right. So it's more about, you know, paying direct mail firms and things to get individual donors than it is about talking to people, which is concerning. Sure hope that I make the debate, but we got a long way to go between today and the election. If we go back 4 years ago, I think Scott Walker was number one,
right.
Jeb Bush was number two. We saw what happened. So I think having an important voice on that debate stage is the only person that actually won on Trump's stage, is the only person that's gotten progressive things done. But whatever happens in a month, that won't shape what I'm out doing.
Okay, so just to be clear, I mean, obviously the bar is very high, and the bar, I think it's even higher for the second debate in terms of the number of individuals.
Yeah.
But if you don't make that first debate, you wouldn't necessarily drop out.
Yeah, and the bar is high. In some ways, I'm disadvantaged. I only got into this 2 weeks ago because I had a job to do. My legislature was still going on. I had to get Medicaid expansion reauthorized. I had to freeze college tuition. So hopefully we'll get there by the number of donors. I think we'll get there by the polling. But even if not, this conversation is going to go a long past this next month for sure.
Let's talk about some of the issues and the topics people are debating. Do you think President Trump should be impeached?
I think that Congress needs to fulfill its full oversight authority of the executive branch. And interestingly enough, the executive branch actually has to comply, like saying we're not even going to send people there. But, you know, I made two days ago, I was at 5 different stops in Iowa. People were talking about health care and jobs and about the tariffs and the fact that they've got the soybeans in the bin. They're not talking about impeachment. And I think I would much rather be focusing on what folks need for the next year and a half, not sort of the squabble. And that's not to accept, I mean, the behavior of this president. We shouldn't normalize that, but we ought to actually be focusing on things that impact people's lives, and that's what we should be talking about for the year.
All right, well, you mentioned soybean farmers. So what do you make of Trump's approach to dealing with China, and what would the ideal trading relationship with China look like under your presidency?
You bet, yeah. Met with a guy this past week, lost $147,000 this year. He said, yeah, we'll get $70,000 back from the USDA, but A, we're losing 77 grand, and B, we're going to lose those markets permanently. Now, I think we need to be tough on China, and this has been something that didn't start yesterday, right? This started when we gave them MFN status, but we can't go it alone. Like just using, I kind of say he's playing checkers. 25% increase in tariffs. That won't just impact those farmers. That'll impact every family in America to the tune of $2,000 a year. So you can't just use the blunt instrument of tariffs when they're playing a long game of chess. We've got to get their markets open. We've got to make sure, and that's working with our allies and our adversaries.
So what specifically, I mean, obviously Trump's done more than tariffs because now we see the administration going after some of their tech giants, things that go beyond merely raising prices or the trading relationship. So what are those long-term tools that an administration could use to, as you put it, or to improve the playing field?
Yeah, and I think certainly you have to try to get enforceability out of the World Trade Organization. That's not going to be enough. If they're not opening up their borders, not just to U.S. goods, but also goods from around the countries. When you have a different status for getting into the Chinese market, our allies and some of our adversaries have to come together. I mean, Trump's kind of made America first into America alone, and I don't think that's working. You can look at what last 25 years. China first did this with the steel industry, right? They put up borders around their state, they subsidized an actor, and then they unleashed that actor on the world. Right. Then they did it with credit cards. Then they did it with microchips. Now they're doing it with tech. So certainly shouldn't allow or require this tech transfers that we're seeing. But you can't do this just like the U.S. can't do this alone by any measure.
Last question. You mentioned fighting for Medicaid expansion in your state. Where do you stand from a national perspective? Obviously, Medicare for all gaining momentum, debates going on within your party about the existence or role of private health insurance. Where would you like to see the national health insurance system go?
I think that health insurance or health care ought to be accessible to all and affordable. And affordable both to the individual and also to the federal government. So what I would propose is public option, negotiating drug prices, getting rid of surprise medical billing and out-of-network care, but not necessarily disrupting the 70% of folks that have employer-sponsored health care. We should make that more affordable, but I don't think that at the end of the day, completely upending a system that is here. Maybe if you're starting from scratch, but that's not where we are.